Hey, what's up, everybody? It's BDF44. So I made a video about the Dallas Mavericks versus Clipper Game 4, and I hadn't seen any highlights, and it was a couple of inaccuracies, so I just erased that, and here I am making this video now. So those inaccuracies were never said, so I don't have to correct it. Wink, wink. But what I will say is the Clippers did not win today's game. Playoff P did not play well, and Luka Doncic went completely off and won the game in overtime with one of the more beautiful step back, fall away, 3-point shots at the buzzer that you'll ever see in your life. One of the great playoff shots you'll ever see. I want to start off by saying that Paul George is making me really, really happy that the Lakers didn't trade for him when we had an opportunity to, about 3 years ago. That Paul George was Pacer player, free agent at the time, perennial defender, all that good stuff, great player, great offensive and defensive player, fit in just fine in Vogel's system, our guy, our coach. The problem with playoff P is that he doesn't show up in the playoffs. He's a wonderful, wonderful talent, but for me, I didn't want to trade for him. It had nothing to do with any of this. It had to do with that leg injury that he suffered back in, what was that, 15, something like that, 14? Years and years ago that he's completely recovered from. I just didn't feel like he was somebody I wanted to give max money to because of that injury. But to be honest with you, I feel differently about him now. Same conclusion, different reasons. This guy just doesn't show up when you need him to. Not only does he not show up, but he's pretty damn consistent in not showing up. He's averaging somewhere around 3 or 4 made field goals in this series. We've already played 4 games, and he has averaged 4 or 3 made field goals. Now, he's shooting 15 of them pretty much a game, somewhere around there. But he's only making 3, 4, 3. Like, what are we doing, Paul? He did have a couple boards, 8 boards. I think it was 9 points, 8 boards. Something like that, a couple assists, 20% shooting, 20-something% shooting rather, 26, something like that. Just awful, just bad. Look, if your shoulder's that bad, sit down. You are shooting 15 shots, and those are what? Let's give or take about 11 shots that aren't falling. Those shots should be in Lou Williams' hands. Those shots should be obviously Kawhi Leonard's. Those shots should be maybe Trez. Maybe you want to give those looks to even Patrick Beverly. Maybe you want to give those looks to Landry Shamet. Clippers do have enough on their team, to say the least, to make up for whatever Paul George isn't giving them. But the problem is, if Paul George is out there and he ain't giving them nothing, that means he's taking away from the guys who should be doing something. So I don't know. I mean, as a fan of the Lakers, I'm enjoying what I'm seeing here, obviously, but as just an NBA analyst, Doc Rivers has to get back to the drawing board and really figure out if he trusts Paul George right now. I don't. And that's just what it is. I look at him and I say, I'm glad he's not here. I'm glad he played for the Clippers and not the Lakers. Because if he was doing this in a Laker uniform, we would be giving him all of the hell. And this is bad energy, man. When you come out there and you stink it up 3 out of 4 playoff games in the first round, and you're supposed to be the best team in the league, I can't imagine that locker room was too nice to be in right now. I can't imagine anybody there is happy. Anybody. Obviously Luka was called a BA white boy. I'm not going to say the word right now. I just don't feel like speaking that way right now. But and to me, I felt like, the apology that Trez gave him before the game seemed like it was received well by Luka. I don't think Luka was as offended as everyone is about that, but who knows? You know what I mean? At the end of the day, they patched that up. It was good to see. And Luka went out and made sure that he made him eat them words, man. He made him eat those words. And you will know not to fire up Luka Doncic going forward. Everybody's on notice. Don't fire him up. Don't think that he's somebody that's just going to roll over. Do not be fooled. This is not a normal athlete. This is one of the elite basketball players in the world, and you will respect him. That's where we at with that. And I think he's earned that respect. It's not like he has one of those type of personalities that pisses people off. This is one of the more nice pleasant type of personalities in the league as well. So it really does kind of, I don't know, it just doesn't sit right with me when somebody like Trez is talking like this to a guy like Luka. But at the same time, I know what Trez is going through. I know his head is probably not where it needs to be. And like I said, he apologized, and I think that's that. Let society run with everything else. As long as the players seem to be okay, bygones are bygones, and that it's time to play ball. So when they got back on the court, Luka dropped 43 to make him eat those words, and I'm thinking that's the right move. That's the way you do it. You show them on the court. What else? The Clippers defense. Clippers defense needs to improve, and I know that sounds ridiculous with them having one of the best defensive players in the world in Kawhi Leonard. Paul George is supposed to be one of the best defensive players in the world when he's right. Patrick Beverley the same. So they have obviously one of the great defensive trios you'll find in the league right now. The problem is when you go to overtime, yes, the numbers are going to be increased. It's not regulation, but there's no reason why the Dallas Mavericks should be able to drop 135 points on you without Kristaps Porzingis, who did not play in this game. That should never, ever happen. And the series is tied at 2-2, and it's looking like the Clippers are losing momentum here. Like, you know, with the series tied the way that it is, it feels like the Clippers are down in the series because they didn't play well in Game 1. Kristaps got removed, and they were able to squeak it out. Game 2, they got their stuff together and pretty much stayed ahead most of that game. Won it. Is that right? No. Dallas won the game. Dallas took care of that game. Came back tied at 2-2. The Clippers then came back, played well. I saw some good things out of Landry Shamet in Game 3, which I was excited to see because I liked that player. I liked him when he was with Philly, and I thought it was a good acquisition for the Clippers. And he hasn't really shown that, but he did in Game 3. So I felt like that was a good look for their bench of what I've been screaming isn't as strong as many are saying they are. I think they're about maybe 5 deep on that bench, and they make it sound like they have the greatest bench in the world. But for me, a great bench means that everybody on it is really, really, really contributing. And the Clippers don't have a full bench of contributors. What they have is a top-heavy bench of players who probably should be starting on most teams. And that's why they have, quote-unquote, the best bench in the league. But if one of those guys or two of those guys go down, suddenly that bench goes from really, really good to really, really bad really, really quickly. So that, in my estimation, does not mean you have a strong bench. It just means that you have a very strong duo of players to bring off of your bench, which could make you have a great bench. Don't get it twisted, but there's no depth there. It's an illusion, you know. It's not. When I think of a great bench, I think of being able to withstand injury. Clippers cannot. So that's something that I'm paying attention to. In this series going forward, it's a 3-game series. I still have the Clippers winning the series. I wouldn't be surprised if the Clippers win both of these next 2 games, unfortunately. I just don't want to buy into the hype just yet. The Clippers are still a team that can do a lot of great things. But here's where it starts to get really tricky. Here's where I would say, you know what, don't bet on this series. Paul George has been very, very consistent in being very, very bad in this series. I don't know if it's because they've effectively schemed against him. I don't know if it's just the shoulder injury or what have you. But I can tell you this. He's putting up 15 shots, and he's pulling down. He's making about 4 of them. So if that continues, I don't expect to see anything good happen for the Clippers in this series. They could go down in 6 themselves. I expect Doc to make some adjustments. I expect Kristaps Porzingis to come back. I expect Luka Doncic's ankle is going to continue to respond well. Obviously, the man went off in one of the best games you ever seen in your life on that ankle, so I'd imagine it's going to be okay going forward. He just really did. You know, Luka really did put on one of the great performances today. You know, that's why I felt it was very important to not come back here and make a real video about this thing, because he didn't play around out there. Some of the stuff that he was doing was just magical. Like, he was really, really putting on a display of not only efficient basketball, but just beautiful moves. Just moves all over the place. Step backs and clutch plays, layups. He was killing them. Like, he was really, really taking over that basketball game and going straight at that Clipper defense. That's supposed to be the greatest thing you ever seen. So, yeah, man, Clippers got holes. And I'm telling you right now, it doesn't matter what happened in this series. Whether they win or lose. If they lose, obviously that certainly changes things. But if they win this series, I still see holes in their team. And I'm telling you right now, as much as I respect the Dallas Mavericks and as much as I've been kind of critical of my basketball team, if the Clippers win this series and approach our series a couple series from now, couple rounds from now, the way they approach this Dallas series, we sweeping their ass. No wins. They will get no wins if they play like this. If Paul George is going 3 for 15 against the Lakers, we running them out of the gym. And I know that's kind of tricky because you're talking about two teams that are going to wake up for each other no matter what. It's like the Redskins and the Cowboys. It doesn't matter who's playing in the uniforms. If those two teams are going up against each other, you're going to deal with something. So I'd imagine it's going to be the same thing with the Clippers and the Lakers for this era. But the problem is, Clippers can't play like this against us. They can't. You cannot do this. You can't play lackluster defense and let us drop 130 on your head. You can't come out here and score 3 for 15 on us, PG. And Kawhi, look, since we're talking about the Clippers, I think it's important to mention this. Kawhi Leonard made the worst decision of the three choices that he had. And a lot of people were giving him a lot of credit for it because it made for a lot of parity. But the reality is he made the worst decision of the three options he had. I knew it that day, and I know it even more now. He should have either went to the Lakers, as to which I don't think was his best option, or he should have stayed in Toronto, which I definitely think was his best option. And just giving them another year and a half. Give him a 1-1, bro. But he wanted to be in LA for personal reasons, which I have no problem with. But in coming to LA, his ego, and I'm going to say this, I don't know if I ever said it before, but his ego appears to have gotten away. He did not want to share a team with LeBron James. And in my opinion, that decision wasn't made in the right spirit. You know what I mean? It just wasn't. When you and this is gonna get into a different type of conversation. I don't want to get into that conversation right now, so I'd rather make another video about that. But I'll just say he didn't make the right decision for himself, and leave it at that. So, whatever happens with this series, whatever people decide to say about Paul George and Kawhi Leonard as a duo, the reality is the Clippers gave away a whole lot to bring in Paul George. All of their picks, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, of whom I'm a great fan of, and Danilo Gallinari, who's really, really turned into a fantastic scoring option for any team that he's on. He's been really, really consistent pretty much the whole time that he's been healthy. And an underrated player, in my opinion. So they gave away a massive load and brought back one player. And in that one player, they brought back a 2-year contract for him. The last couple years he's been in the playoffs, he ain't did nothing. In fact, he's been pretty bad. And this is a continuation of such. I really think the Clippers might have shot themselves in the foot a lot worse than we thought. Obviously, they still got another year of Paul George and Kawhi Leonard. But like this playoff series, the way that they've approached these 4 games is telling me that they have big problems. And maybe they go away. Maybe their talent is able to overcome those problems. But what I'm seeing down there is a team of guys that probably wouldn't mind being in better situations for themselves. And I know that sounds crazy because they're on a great contending team. But there's something not working there. And I've heard a few people, just people on the fly say that they don't think Paul George and Kawhi Leonard are really getting along. They're not on the same page. People going in and out of the lineup, blah, blah, blah. The Clippers haven't had a full togetherness of their team since the beginning of the season, maybe but a couple times, and when they do, they always win. All of that is beautiful. But it comes a point where you have to ask yourself, is this the exception or is this the rule? The Clippers have only played a handful of games together. I think that's the rule. I don't think that that's because guys just happen to not be healthy at the same time. I think you have an issue here. And it'll be really interesting to see what happens in their offseason, especially if they fall to the Dallas Mavericks in the first round. After all this nonsense, people giving them all this credit, saying they're going to win all this, beating the Lakers and all. If they don't even get out of the Dallas series with a half of Porzingis and a hobbled Luka Doncic, listen to me. This is catastrophic for the Clippers. This is catastrophic. I know it's early, so I don't want to overreact, even though it's very easy to do so. They can still very well come back out, blow Dallas out in 2 games, and all of this is forgotten. I can totally see that. But they have to make some serious adjustments in order for that to even be remotely possible at this point. The momentum is all Dallas right now, and it has been since the beginning of the series. Dallas should have never lost game 1 when Porzingis was wrongfully tossed out of that game. I would love for the NBA to go ahead and take a look at how that process came about and maybe make some rule changes to assure that that never, ever happens again. I know 2 technicals means you're out, but this was one of those situations where you can clearly see where that's a little flawed. And I would love for us to kind of get to a point where we're not kicking all-stars out of playoff games because of scrums. I mean, scrums are going to happen in playoff games. If there's no punches thrown and a guy got a technical earlier because he was pissed off about a call, he should not be kicked out of the game. If you want to remove him for maybe a certain amount of minutes, that could become problematic for coaches' schemes, but no more problematic than removing the player altogether from the team, from the game. You see what I'm saying? Just like they do in hockey. They sit you down for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever the infraction is, or so what have you. You're sitting for that duration and you come back. Maybe that's how the NBA needs to start thinking, because what happened to Porzingis in game 1, it changed the series for them. We're looking at a 3-1 series with them ready to close the Clippers out if that doesn't happen. And I think most people agree. So it's like, let's take a look at that one, NBA. So yeah, man, shout out to the Dallas Mavericks for putting up a hell of an effort against the Clippers and winning the game today. You still got a lot of work to do. You are nowhere near out of this series. You're still going up against a team that is more talented than you. But as I said at the beginning of these playoffs, this is one of the better coaching first rounds I've ever seen in my life. When you're talking about Carlisle and you're talking about Doc Rivers, you're not going to find a pair of coaches better than this in these playoffs right now. So at this point, it's like, well, if anybody can do it with less, it's the great coach that the Mavericks have. So he's already won it, just like Doc. He got a ring. So it's like, and they have a great player. I can argue, and I don't think many people will agree with me right now, and I don't blame you guys at all. But I could argue Luka Doncic is the greatest player on the floor between the 2 teams. I have a lot of respect for Kawhi Leonard. And that's exactly how much respect I have for Luka Doncic in saying that. You know what I mean? It's not like I'm saying it lightly or not considering who's on the floor. I'm simply saying Luka might actually be better than Kawhi. And I don't think that that's crazy right now. I think what we're seeing is helping us understand that, this may be the case. So it's going to be interesting, man. It's going to be very interesting. I'm going to keep a close eye on this series for the rest of the time. And, hopefully the Mavs win it. As a Laker fan, I know a lot of people are like, why you want to duck the Clippers? I just want a championship. I don't give a damn who's in the way. Whoever's in the way is getting out of the way. But if one of my enemies can get knocked off before I have to ever see them, I'm not going to complain about that. I'm not that kind of competitor. Knock them off. We just want the ring. We don't care who's in the way. My name is BDF44, and I'm out.